The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome. This is the third panel of Reproaction and SWS's Integrating Teaching, Research, and Activism series. And I'm so excited to have this conversation about integrative approaches in action. It is incredible. We have a panelist that's going to be amazing today. I'm going to get into a little bit of what Reproaction is and what we do. So we're working to increase access to abortion and advance reproductive justice. We're proud of our left flank analysis and are not in this fight to protect the past or maintain the status quo. We celebrate legal, accessible, and funded abortion as a great thing. We hold the right to parent and the right to raise children in safe and healthy communities as equally sacred in the struggle for dignity. And we aim to increase the use of direct action in accomplishing our goals. You can follow us at Reproaction on X/Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can also check us out at our website, reproaction.org. Sociologists for Women in Society, or SWS for short, is a nonprofit professional feminist organization dedicated to transforming the academy and professional organizations, including our own, by actively supporting feminist leadership and advancing career development of feminist scholars. Recognizing their struggle, that structural inequalities impact those marginalized by their identities, and that this requires proactively promoting the creation of inclusive institutional spaces in an ongoing manner and by practicing critical reflexivity. We also advocate and encourage the development of sociological feminist theory rooted in intersectionality and cutting-edge research for publication and dissemination. We also promote social justice research within local, national, and international activist spaces by supporting scholar activist communities seeking to dismantle intersecting systems of oppression. And I'll just add in that SWS is a section of ASA, which is the American Sociological Association, which is an international org. So you become a member of ASA and you can become a member of SWS within that. And you can follow us at Social Women. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and check us out at our website, which is where you'll find most of our information, how to join, how to gain our resources, attend meetings, conferences, and what have you at socialwomen.org. So I want to get us a little grounded today. If you've attended one or both of the previous panel discussions in this series, this is going to sound familiar to you. But in this 3-panel series, scholar activists and movement leaders, we're discussing how we use education as a tool for liberation. We did that on the first panel, how we conduct and apply research to advance social justice issues. We discussed that on the second panel, and how we integrate teaching or education, research, and activism on this panel that you are attending right now. So though we have words to describe teaching, research, and activism separately, they are reflexive processes in social justice advocacy. So the phrase integrative approach in the context of this series is meant to capture this. So I'm gonna, this comes out of Heather and I'm Ivania Woods, the Senior VP of Research and Movement Building at Reproaction and Social Action Committee Co-Chair with SWS. And I'll let Heather introduce herself.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. I am Heather Holofka and the co-chair with Ivania for the Social Action Committee. I am professor at Marquette University in teaching in sociology and law studies. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. All right. So we'll get right into introducing these panelists. We have Jillian Kane, Roberta. I should have actually had to pronounce your last name before this, but you can let us know when we get to our first question. I'm going to say Villalon. My Spanish is wacky. Caitlin Gertz and Mindy Freed. And I want to get into a little bit more background of our panelists today. So Jillian is a recognized researcher and writer on global movements against sexual and reproductive rights and LGBTI plus rights. She's the senior technical lead for policy and advocacy for IPAS, an international organization focused on expanding access to safe abortion and contraception. You can check them out at their website, IPAS.org, do a lot of incredible things. Jillian has a BA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a master's degree in Latin American and Caribbean Studies from New York University. She spent the last, missed that T, 2 decades advocating for women's human rights, which has included the publication of numerous articles and reports. And their bio, as with everyone's bio, is much lengthier. Everybody's very accomplished, but I did condense them for the purposes of this presentation. So Roberta is a Fulbright scholar who's published various books and articles that have blended critical theory with transnational practice. Her last completed work is a transnational, interdisciplinary, and applied research project on health inequalities and migration, focusing on the Ecuadorian case. She is the former chair of St. John's Sociology and Anthropology Department and a former president of SWS, okay? Roberta currently co-runs the Latin plus Feminist Sociology Collective, which is a space to share, validate, reflect, and co-produce knowledge about being a critically conscious Latin plus feminist scholar in the global north. And next we have Caitlin Gertz, who leads the development and implementation of IVAS's research agenda. She works alongside activists to document the safety and effectiveness of feminist abortion accompaniment models for self-managed medication abortion throughout pregnancy. She contributed to the study accompaniment feasibility and effectiveness study and served as a member of the guidelines development group for the 2022 World Health Organization Abortion Care Guideline. She's also co-authored more than 100 peer-reviewed publications. And last but certainly not least is Mindy, who's a sociologist with 30 years of experience conducting research, teaching, and policy analysis on organizational and workplace issues. She works collaboratively with organizations to help them build their capacity and strengthen their programs and policies. She's a skilled facilitator and trainer and has designed and implemented large-scale community-based participatory research projects. Mindy has published several books, including Caring for Red, A Daughter's Memoir, Taking Time, Parental Leave Policy and Corporate Culture, and Babies in Bargaining, Working Parents Take Action. Right, so let's get into the panel discussion. And our first question is, why did you choose to conduct your work using an integrative approach? And Jillian, can you get us started give us a little background on your journey into this?
Thanks, Ivania. Yeah, happy to kick us off. So thanks, Ivania, for the introduction, and just to add a little bit more texture about what my work involves, because that will help inform discussing the integrative approach. So as Ivania mentioned, IPAS works on increasing access to abortion and contraception. We work on all different parts of it. We're a networked organization. We have, I lost count, but I think 19 hubs as part of our global hub. So we work in 3 different continents, and I work within this on the policy piece. So because I'm working on working on increasing access to abortion through focusing on policy and advocacy, it is inherently an integrative approach. So just from starting from how do you move policy forward? You're always going to be engaging with a wide variety of actors from different sectors. So you're working with government, civil society, media. In our case, we're working with the medical sector. We're working with students. So that goes for the same once a policy has been implemented, and then also ensuring once the policy has been implemented, how do you ensure that the services, if that's what you're working on, are fair and equitable and available. So that's sort of the work piece. In terms of the integrative piece, and one of the questions that was asked of us for this panel is, so what do you bring along and what do you shed? And so looking at policy, especially around the issue of abortion, one of the things that we confront right away is opposition to our issues. So what I've integrated into our integrative approach is this research capacity, looking at kind of who's against our rights, who are they, who funds them, what are they looking at. Now this work can't happen in isolation. Certainly I can sit at a computer, look at, newsletters from anti-abortion groups, I can go to a meeting, but all of this is really informed by what our partners are also experiencing. So to that end, we work with folks who are in the medical sector who confront opposition to abortion in their daily work. Same goes for folks who work in the government or the media. So all of these pieces, all these folks who work in these different sectors inform our approach to policy and advocacy. And as part of that as well is linking it to action and activism. So with information comes strength. And so how do we circulate information about our issues? So working with the media is a really big part of that, educating the media, and also making sure that there's the next generation of people who understand the issues and can also move them forward. So that is my very short recap on the work, and happy to dig into it later. But I would say that there's the integrative approach is not a choice necessarily, but rather a need, because there's no way to move this work forward if it's not in companionship with other partners and different sectors. So thanks, and I think it's over to Roberta.
Yes, thank you, gracias, and thank you for being here and having us share this space. And I'm really, my answer is really following the core of what was just said. But what I wanted to add was that I'm coming from Argentina, from Latin America, and a completely different context in terms of thinking why we study and what are we studying for, right? And how is it that we get involved, especially when we're studying, fields like sociology or the social sciences or humanities. And this kind of separation between teaching, research, and activism is not really universal, right? In other parts of the world, those three things come together, period. There's no division among them. So in my case, my background is in political science, and then Latin American studies, and then finally sociology. But throughout all of these different moments of, like getting into academics, there was never an idea or a suggestion that you would have to just remain in this kind of abstract area of the world without applying or thinking about how all of this knowledge is actually coming from and could be applied to reality, right? The reality that was actually the reason why we were interested in getting into learning about these different issues. So in other words, to me, there was no other way, right? I couldn't think of being a sociologist without thinking about applying, right? And doing sociology together with people who were not academics, right? Or who were not just limited within academia. And so I've devoted myself to working on what's labeled here as activist research or participatory action research, and insisting that in other parts of the world, that's just simply means doing sociology, right? We do it that way. So that's how and why. And yes, it also made a lot of sense in terms of the kind of research that I was doing. So my interests were always related to social movements, on human rights issues, on gender violence, on health equity and justice. So how can you study social movements and not be part of them, right? So I guess I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great. I think it's my turn. And just thank you for having me, and thanks so much to my co-panelists. It's so wonderful to learn about the work that you do and the way that you do your work. As Ivania said, my name is Caitlin, my pronouns are she, her, and I work for an organization called IVIS Reproductive Health. And we are a nonprofit research organization that drives change through rigorous research and principled partnerships that advance sexual and reproductive autonomy, choices, and health worldwide. So I'm at IVIS, my role is serving as the vice president for research, and I'm an epidemiologist by training. I've studied abortion for my entire career, and I really came to the topic early, knowing that my draw to public health, of which epidemiology, of course, is a part, was to ensure that all people have the resources and the autonomy to thrive, and recognizing that there's an inherently intersectional way to do that, that community-led approaches to research are really a core part of the way that we conduct public health research and engage in public health. And knowing that abortion itself is an inherently intersectional topic. It's a human rights issue, it's a reproductive justice issue, it's a racial justice issue, an economic, housing, immigration, and trans justice issue. By its very nature, studying abortion and thinking about abortion and engaging in it forces us to think intersectionally. And I came to epidemiology because I really admired the methods and rigor of the discipline, but because at the time that I was pursuing a doctoral degree in public health, I realized that there were alarmingly few epidemiologists who actually studied abortion, and that is certainly changing, but remains true that it is sort of a siloed topic within epidemiology. And really over my career in the field of epidemiology and studying abortion, I continue to believe that epidemiology and the methods that we use have a lot to contribute to abortion research. But I have also come to realize that as researchers, we have to know our history and know that the very endeavor of research, and especially public health research, has been and continues to be a tool of oppression, and that research causes very real harm and has been a fundamentally extractive process for most of the history of the endeavor. And thinking about the way that research has been used to extract information from rather than create information with the communities who are most impacted on by the topics we study has led me to think about research differently and realize that we really have to change that. And I have been very fortunate in my career to work with and partner with a range of different folks, advocates, activists, clinicians, but most especially abortion accompaniment groups, which are grassroots feminist collectives around the globe who provide holistic support for people to safely self-manage medication abortions outside of clinic settings. And I've really come to understand that the way that we do research has to be done in equitable partnership with the people and communities who are the experts in their own lives and experience. So the accompaniers and people who have abortions in their communities, they are the ones who know what questions most urgently need to be answered, and they know how to ask those questions and how to contextualize and understand the data, which really leads to the idea of an entirely new, more radical process of doing research collectively and circling back and engaging with and allowing communities to drive how research happens and how the results of it get back to them. And I'll stop there.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. My name is Mindy Freed, and first of all, I just want to thank the previous panelists and Ivania for inviting us. I kind of have the advantage of hearing all of you before I dive in, so it's been a pleasure. I think, our initial question was, about how we came to embrace and employ an integrative approach. So I'm going to start with a personal note, which is to say that my dad was a labor organizer and activist, and he was subpoenaed by the House Un-American Activities Committee in the 1950s and again in the 1960s. If that doesn't sound familiar to you, it was a very dark time in US history in which people were persecuted for their political beliefs, lost jobs, some were jailed, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, I'd say for me, I learned in a very visceral way the importance of staying true to your beliefs and not being afraid to stand up and fight, you know, with a strong model to incorporate activism in whatever I chose to do. So I'm grateful for that. I call myself an applied sociologist, and I also do public sociology. So in the world of sociology, I think oftentimes people presume that sociologists are all teachers, and there are a lot of us who take our sociological understanding, our knowledge base and so on, and work outside of the academy in a variety of ways. So that's something that I've been doing for decades. And public sociologists are people who are basically, many academics are doing public sociology, where, you know, sort of like what Roberta was explaining in terms of her definition of sociology is basically public sociology and activist sociology connecting with work that really matters, using your research in a way that's applied and makes a difference and is grounded in people's experience. So, so prior to becoming a sociologist, I did policy work mainly focused on bringing a feminist perspective to understanding workplace policies like childcare and parental leave. I was a lobbyist for a while for a state-funded childcare organization in Massachusetts, and through that work, I learned more about status hierarchy in the workplace, the devaluing of care labor, which is often provided by women and people of color. And, you know, it led to a project in which I brought together activists from around the state who worked on a range of issues, including domestic violence, welfare rights, healthcare, childcare, and more, to work collaboratively together to increase funding in the state budget for those particular programs. As an applied sociologist, I wear a number of hats. For the past 20 years, I've been principal of a small social science consulting group called Arbor Consulting Partners. And what we do is we support organizations to strengthen their programs so that they can make a difference. Sometimes that's policy oriented, sometimes that is program level. So the areas that I've been working on most recently have to do with grassroots organizing campaigns, leadership programs, as well as arts-based programs. So, for example, I spent a couple years evaluating a wage theft campaign. Wage theft, as you probably know or may know, is when an employer is denying rightful wages to workers, and often it's immigrants who are the victims of that. And so this coalition that worked on the wage theft campaign brought together labor activists and immigrant rights activists. And I approached that piece of work. We were talking earlier about approaches to research. Kind of as an ethnographer, I was part of a group of people who used a multi-pronged strategy to educate people about wage theft and to streamline legal action against employers who are underpaying or not paying their workers. So that was really exciting to be a part of it. I learned a lot about the notion of cultural humility. You know, I wasn't always the smartest person in the room. I certainly was learning from all the people and all the work that they were doing, and then I had something to offer too, as I helped them kind of maintain their funding and do a survey to assess the degree to which people were experiencing wage theft in their jobs. And currently, I'm evaluating a leadership program for artists. And all the artists, there are 15 artists from all over the country, and all of their work is oriented towards social change. So it's been exciting to do this kind of consulting where, to the degree possible, I'm very engaged in participatory action research. Always work very much from the ground up, and so that has fueled me a lot. And I'm really driven by wanting to support movements that are making a difference. So, and I'd say the another hat that I wear for the past 10 years, I have been the executive director of a nonprofit called Hoopla Productions. This is an organization that is designed to build community across the divides of race, class, culture, and immigrant status through the vehicle of the arts. So we started by creating what's called a Porch Fest. Many of you may have heard of that. Porch Fests are festivals in which generally musicians perform on porches around a community, and everybody is welcome and invited. You know, I'll talk a little bit more about that. We've tweaked it because our Porch Fest had a more of a diversity agenda, and so we operated differently. And then for the past 3 years, I've been producing events focused on immigrant stories and immigrant rights. And I think for the sake of time, I'll hold off on talking more about that later. So I guess we're back to, are we kind of just cycling through the questions? So maybe it's back to
Let me,
Julia.
Mike, let me moderate. Docs agree.
Sure.
So what's the organization name again that you were doing? I think with Porch Fest, maybe.
Oh yeah.
What was the organization name?
It was called Jamaica Plain Porch Fest because it is located in the neighborhood of Jamaica Plain.
Ah, okay, Plain being Plain. Okay.
That's right.
All right. Yeah, someone posed that question in the chat, so I just wanted to work that in. Oh wait, let me go. I got a little 2 cents to add here. So when I first started in my first graduate sociology graduate program, when they did the orientation, the chair basically told the incoming students, the people who were in my cohort, and I, of course, that he's like, how many of you are here to save the world? Raise your hand. And then he's like, if you have your hand raised, you're in the wrong place, right? Like he was in a theory, right? So he was theory driven. He considered himself a sociological theorist, and really didn't buy into the whole practical or praxis or intersectionality. And it's like, there was some of that in my second, with my second chair as well. Like all of us sociologists know this in the field. So it seems like a weird question to ask, but I do love, Roberta, for you bringing to light that like the rest of the world, this isn't an issue. Like we understand this and we know this. And of course, the United States is always on its own thing. So you said it in a very polite way, but I'm like, oh, child, yes. Yeah, a fight that we shouldn't have to fight, but here we are. All right, so the next question is for Roberta. I want to know, how might academic mentors challenge themselves to think more widely about the reach and impact of their academic contributions? And I ask this because when we think about publications and teaching, which a lot of research institutions, even teaching institutions, like the emphasis is on that. Even at R1, the emphasis isn't on teaching, it's on research, it's on publication. So you have these things you have to do as an academic, as a professor, to keep your job, to be considered doing well, to get tenure, you know what I mean? But like a lot of the publications in peer-reviewed journals that are behind paywalls, and so people in the public or people who may benefit more from the research may not have access to it. And so I was thinking about that, and I don't want to limit you to that, but that's where I was posing the question from. But yeah, let us know like what your answer to this question is. Thank you.
So sure. I think it's a little bit of a trick question because in a way, right, sociology, like any other field, will have different schools of thought, right? And these come together with ideological perspectives and political positions. And, you know, for some sociologists, those things are not part of sociology, right? For example, positivists and some other I guess professors who think that sociology just be, you know, on the side or independent from all of these other things. But realities and feminist sociologists and many other critical theories have shown the opposite, right? So some some people are not going to be interested in finding those other audiences, really. They're going to just hope and see how communities or people elsewhere will find their research and their wisdom and then figure out how to apply it. So it's something that in the end will be a personal decision, I think, right? Now, on the other hand, if you are a person who's, I guess, a little bit more open-minded and realize that sociology is not separate from society, right? And its reason to be is to affect or be in communication with, in conversation, in this kind of productive relationship with society, then you will consider, right, multiple ways in which you can make your research be impactful in different ways. So that could happen while you are still publishing for those journals and trying to get, you know, your tenure position or the credentials that you need to have that job that you need as well, right? They don't have to go against each other. So you can publish a book or a journal article, but at the same time, right, you can be very active in making sure that you prepare your publications in multiple formats, right? You can have websites that have very accessible language and have social media campaigns where you are, let's say, translating something that could have been written in a very jargony and dense way in the simple terms that will be, I guess, understandable, right, for a variety of audiences. And so you need to keep doing these kinds of translations. Sometimes the translation is about the language that you're using in terms of, like, let's say if you're working with migrant communities, it doesn't make sense that you speak in a language that they don't understand, right? That's pretty obvious. But then it takes that extra effort of saying, I'm going to publish this in multiple languages, right? You can make sure that you connect with radio stations, that you connect with those who are working in the communities, and then you can figure out if you need to do workshops or whatever ways, whatever other ways they may think, right? Like, because they're the ones who will be knowing better how to reach these audiences. And so I guess, like, step number one is to understand that for your work to have any kind of impact beyond these very small circles within academia, you need to have that extension of time and effort after your, let's say, your reporting is done, to figure out all these other ways that you can make sure that this work and the knowledge that you have created or co-created with others is really reaching those who will need it, right? And who will actually care for that knowledge. So I guess that's my take on this.
Oh yeah, thanks for that. And I just want to say that even though, like, this question is was asked and answered in more of a sociological or the sociology context, you can apply this regardless of what job you work or what field you're in. And hopefully you're able to do that. So I want to ask the rest of the panelists, how has your academic training impacted your ability to assess and meet the needs of your communities? And Jillian, get us started.
Thanks. And I think the short answer is I'm not sure it has in terms of directly meeting the needs of communities. So I should say I'm maybe an outlier here in terms of, well, I'm not an academic, but I did do my master's degree in Latin American and Caribbean studies, and I focused on a interesting topic, well, interesting to me anyway, which was I was looking at right-wing movements. That was my interest, and it remains my interest as I continue my work in the abortion, reproductive rights, and reproductive justice movement. And so my work was looking at a fascist movement in Brazil right after World War II, so the post-war period, and actually right before as well. And it was looking at the intersection of a modernist literary movement and how it informed this fascist movement in Brazil. And I share all of that because one thing that was very clear and to me is that these movements, these fascist movements, rooted in the pre and post war, still continue to inform the work that is against abortion today. So, when I think of community, I think of it, obviously in the very, typical way. We're talking about like community activists. But for this question, I'm going to think about it more broadly in order to answer it and say that when I was looking at these movements, what I didn't realize is at that time, again, is how pervasive they and long lasting they still are. And so one of the things that I bring to my current work is this historic view and apply a historic narrative to the work. So for example, and I think I mentioned this earlier in my first intervention, is that looking at the issues of abortion, for me, it's always very important to add the historical narrative because we didn't just get here. So for example, last year with Dobbs, there's shock and surprise when I would say the American public, but anybody who's been tracking these issues knows that the challenges to abortion started even before Roe v. Wade decision was made in 1973. So that is what I apply to the lens of research that I undertake currently, especially in other countries outside of the US. So I would say that that is really the thing that has most influenced how I look at advocacy, how I look at policy building through, and it's through this lens of history and ensuring that we preserve that and that the knowledge is shared so that the understanding is that, everything's a cycle. So there's wins and there's losses and they just keep going around and around. And if we're to preserve the wins, we need to, look at what happened, what preceded it, and also how these links continue to this day. So yeah, that's what I say my academic training has done for me. Thanks.
And I guess I will, I'll jump in and say, I think there are ways in which my academic training has really negatively impacted my ability to actually sort of understand and assess and meet needs of communities. In that, I have spent so many years unlearning the things that I was taught in an academic setting. I think as academics and in academia specifically, academics are trained to believe, and very much the academic system rewards researchers who develop ideas on their own and develop an area of inquiry that is sort of solely attributable to them. And that, that is how, that's how advancement and success happens in the academic world. And we're also, at the same time, academics are taught to believe that research and researchers are in some way objective observers. And of course, objectivity itself is a falsehood, and sort of understanding positionality, and as my co-panelists have so brilliantly spoken about already, really engaging with and understanding expertise in different ways, I think has to be the project of a truly integrated approach. I will say, in some ways, some of my academic training has been helpful. So one of the studies that was referenced in my bio was the Studying Accompaniment Feasibility and Effectiveness study, which was a multi-country collaborative study of safe abortion accompaniment and support for self-managed abortion through that model in comparison to clinic-based care. And that was a study that came out of a decade-long collaboration with a range of different accompaniment groups globally who really identified the need. They knew that what they were doing was safe and effective. They had no doubt about that, but they kept encountering sort of doubt and a lack of legitimacy around the approach that they were taking from, both local actors and on the global stage, actors like the World Health Organization that for a very long time until very recently had categorized self-managed abortion as an unsafe abortion. And they knew that that wasn't true, but they needed to partner with researchers who they trusted to use the kind of methods that would allow organizations like the WHO, and in some, in some contexts, sort of local policymakers, ministries of health, et cetera, to see and be able to understand the work that they were doing in the kind of sort of the academic context. And so by partnering with us and by employing the academic training that I have and that my colleagues have, we were able to come together and design and develop a study that would really meet those needs and publish it in a really high impact journal so that they could have it and take it to the places and spaces they needed to. And really, I mean, it was their work and that documentation that helped so much to lead to the change in the WHO guidelines, now fully recommending self-managed medication abortion as a safe and effective method. So I would say those methods have been very helpful, but understanding how to use them in the service of the needs of communities has been a lot of unlearning of the approach that I think is more standard in academia.
Thank you for that. So this is Mindy again, and so it's an interesting question because, I'm a sociologist, and like a lot of sociology programs and just academic programs in general at the PhD level, it's expected that students are going to pursue tenure track jobs, that we're going to kind of replicate the model that we have with our professors. So I was at Brandeis. It was, I think, considered a very progressive sociology department. We were encouraged to be scholars, to be activists, actually, I think, and engaging teachers. And I had some role models who, I could pick and choose who I worked with. And so I did find people who were very supportive. My faculty advisor was a disability activist. He was somebody who lived with polio, had been writing scholarly stuff, but he wrote fiction. He wrote, based on his own experience, he wrote very progressive kind of essays, and he was a great mentor. So yeah, I had that. I mean, there were also kind of the old guard, sociologists who were, maybe people wish would have retired, and by now they have. But even with that in my department, there was really no name for and no preparation to be what I'm calling an applied sociologist, somebody who didn't work in the academy. That said, sociological training is about building analytic skills and learning more about the core issues that you're working on and developing your research chops. And when I was in grad school, having nothing to do at all with, the department that I was in was not involved in this, but I got hired to do some evaluation work for a new program at Tufts University. I literally had no experience doing evaluation research, but there was somebody in my department who was super knowledgeable about this kind of work. And so we were able to hire her, and then she took me on as an apprentice. And in that project, it was a great learning experience because I evaluated an anti-racism training program and was basically a participant observer. So I got to experience that, which is something that you don't get a lot of practice in grad school, my experience was. And I also evaluated a domestic violence shelters program in which we used a participatory, activist, and engaged approach. So everybody was involved. So, all those experiences kind of coupled with my university training kind of reinforced one another. So it's, nobody in my department was objecting, but they also didn't have the skills or the knowledge to kind of help me advance myself in that direction. I don't want to run, as a consultant, you end up working with an awful lot of different kinds of issues. In some cases, I've worked in the corporate sector. I directed a national work study of flexible work policies with 6 major corporations, and learned the value of understanding the dominant culture. What is it about corporate culture that culture driven by profit that then may result in providing some positive programming that benefits employees, because, you know, from their perspective, it's very much a cost benefit issue. But, you know, in my work as a consultant, I've focused on bringing an intersectional lens to my work with nonprofits and and foundations. I've taught, the thing about when I talk about adjunct teaching, usually it's spoken about in sort of a negative light, but when it really is an adjunct to one's main work, it's a cool thing. And I happen to live in Boston, which is very university rich. So I've taught an awful lot of sociology classes. I've taught feminist theory, and developed a course called Gender, Race, Work, and Public Policy, and so on. And I've also taught evaluation research. And, you know, for those of you who teach or have aspired to teaching, you know, you probably know that, you know, teaching is also learning. And so it's really helped me kind of strengthen my understanding of issues and to bring that, you know, these lenses, these more radical lenses to the work that I do. I guess, let's see, I know there was a question, I think I'm going to tuck in my question, the question that you had about Jamaica Plain Porch Fest. You know, we founded Porch Fest with this notion that we wanted to incorporate a diversity mission. I was doing consulting work at the same time, so this is something kind of an add-on. Had no idea that it would become so central for my life. But we looked at Porch Fests all over the country, and there are many of them. There are some in Canada and other places. And Porch Fests are generally festivals where musicians play on their own porches, and to us that was problematic because not everybody has access to a porch, and people, you know, not everybody wants to take that on. So we looked at our neighborhood, which is considered a very progressive neighborhood, but nonetheless is segregated by race, by class, by to a degree by culture and immigrant status. And we determined that we wanted to operationalize our value in diversity and inclusiveness in a way that everybody would be involved. And so we did as we.
Mindy.
Am I going over? Yeah.
Oh yeah. We're gonna stop you right there. But if we have more time for you to get into that, we'll definitely do that. Yeah. So facing obstacles. What challenges and/or obstacles have you faced as a result of employing an integrative approach? And Roberta, we'll start with you.
Sure. And I think that as I was able to learn about the politics of the academy here in the US, I was able to, I guess, prevent or avoid some of these obstacles showing up. But the issue is that clearly, right, being an activist researcher, right, and being so open and transparent about the idea that this work is political and can be combined and should be combined with activism doesn't really sit well with a lot of people, right? And so the academy is still, like, let's say the hegemony or mainstream academy is not so much into having scholars being so openly activist oriented or politically inclined, right? And that includes sociology, women and gender studies, maybe a little bit less, but at least in the field of sociology, that's really the case. So for me, the main obstacles have been, for example, clearly, right, like not being able to get, let's say, callbacks from jobs that I thought were really interesting, but clearly, right, the politics of that department or that university was not aligned with mine. Similarly with publications, right, you have to be very selective where you try to share or to submit publications to be you know, considered and reviewed, because there's plenty of outlets that are not really interested in that kind of approach that we have. And so I guess the formula, I would say, that I was able to kind of shape up was to be very transparent and clear, and also always backing it up, because it's not that we're just thinking we should do this way, right? There's a really long history in sociology, in other fields as well, that tie politics and activism together with scholarship. So whenever I'm being transparent, I'm also bringing all of that in to show that there's some legitimacy, right, besides my own ideals.
Thanks so much, Roberta. That I think I'll build on top of that to say I think for me, what I have experienced, especially in the field of epidemiology, is really a sort of a calling into question the rigor or objectivity, as Roberta was saying, or validity of the data even. And I do think, you know, some of this is just about abortion and about the fact that in academia and in peer-reviewed publications, as in so many things, there's abortion exceptionalism, and there's sort of a like requirement to be more rigorous, to have more documentation about the methods or the approach than something else like looking at the effects of smoking. But I also think that there's a piece about just the topic that people take it to be inherently political, or take any writing or engagement, even scholarly engagement around it, as activism, which, to be fair, I mean, in the field of epidemiology, which is the field of the study of human health, everything is political. Health is political at this point. And so I think the approach that I have taken in those instances is just to remind people that in the current environment in which we live globally, almost every element of human health has been politicized. And if we shy away from that and don't really engage in the conversation around scholarship that is valid and that takes into account the needs of communities, it doesn't matter how objective you try to be, or how, you know, the people who are going to call this into question are going to continue to do that, and all topics are in some ways in our field politicized. And so being able to back up your methods and really take the approach that you know is both rigorous, methodologically sound, and fits community needs, and engaging in this conversation around the fact that health is political, and anything that we study is that, and going forward anyway. I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was like, being alive is political at this point. Yeah. So I want to briefly get into sharing your why. This shouldn't take that long before we get into the wrap-up question. But why does engaging in an integrative approach continue to be worth your time and energy? Got about a minute. I know that's a challenge, but Jillian, what's your why?
Watch me work in 1 minute. Okay. Because it yields results. So I was thinking about this question. I want to anchor it in a solid example, which I will do in 60 seconds. But this is an old example, but several years ago, we were looking at the question, which now is so prominent in the US, is when you have a bad abortion law, what happens when it's enforced? How is it enforced? You know, and I think that was a question, again, a while back that wasn't being answered. And so we did a pilot project in Rwanda because we were hearing anecdotally that there were many women, many of them adolescents, who were in prison for, crimes described as, coming under the abortion law. So we did a study, again, integrated. We worked with partners on the ground. And produced a study that stood up to scrutiny, which said, in fact, yes, over this 1 year period that we're looking at it, there were 300, plus young women in prison for abortion-related crimes. The activists in Rwanda then took this report, circulated it, and it reached the attention. In the ensuing years, there was a conversation oriented around, hey, these abortion laws are being applied. This is bad. It's affecting young girls. We should look at this. And then a few years later, Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, looked at the numbers and then made a decision twice at 2 different points, basically giving amnesty to women who were in prison for abortion. So all which is to say, we're looking at a space of about 5 years, but we really saw results stemming from a unique study that was done in partnership with folks on the ground, going into the prisons, getting the numbers, circulating it with the media and activists, and then the advocates there on the ground, lifting this up to government officials who then responded. So that is a concrete example of an integrative approach that is done in community that results in a positive outcome.
All right, thank you so much. So we're going to move forward to our last question and wrap us up here. We're going to start right with you, Jillian. So don't go too far. How would you like to see support for your work improve?
I think it's a numbers game. The more people know about, everyone on this phone call or this conversation, does really unique, impactful work. I think the more that is known about it, the impact will continue to increase. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I think it's my turn, right? So I would say that on the one hand, like just kind of join us, right? Join us in spreading the word that you can do these 3 things together, and that's perfectly fine and legitimate and actually much more productive than not putting them together. And also, I think think about different ways to work collectively to keep building these bridges, right? Because as much as people who are here probably find these bridges natural and they're hoping to build them, we know that there's much more to be done and that we need everybody involved.
And I'll just add to that to say, we've talked a lot about the ways that systems and structures and academia has excluded people and harmed people, and that is so specifically true for historically marginalized communities around the world. And if we really want a future where everyone has access to the care that they need and the information they need in whatever way works for them, we have to both build a movement that is bigger than just ourselves and that is inherently intersectional, and the science to support it, and build science that itself is integrated and intersectional and multidisciplinary, and then grounded in this particular topic in the reproductive justice framework that allows us to see a future that is better than the systems and structures that used to exist and that exist now.
So I will just say, because everybody has said everything that I agree with, that I think that one thing moving forward is that it's the value of collaboration among people who come from the social sciences or medical sciences, and people in the community can be so valuable. And so I would love to see more of that in the future, because ultimately our goal is to use our skills and our knowledge to build a movement for social change.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for that. Gonna just remind folks that you can follow Reproaction, check out our website, the email if you want more information about any of the work that we do, how you can get involved with us. Also for SWS, where you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and also visit our website and find out how you can become a member and get involved with us. And with that, I want to thank the panelists. Y'all were amazing, as I knew you would be. Thank you. And I'm going to let y'all get the rest of your day back. Thanks for all the attendees for showing up and being so gracious. All right. Y'all have a good one.